and so passionately and persuasively. We'll now turn to the third talk, to Ambreen Hussaini, who's going to be speaking on creative communications in times of crisis.
Okay, stories, personal stories. So I'm going to also share a story of an artist. Okay, first of all, I would like to begin with the territory acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge the land we gather on is on the unceded territories of the Kongs First Nation, the traditional keepers of Hornbill Island, whose relationship with the land continue to this date. As I do this territory acknowledgement, I would also like to acknowledge where I'm coming from. A Pakistani culture, a Muslim culture, where we usually begin our task by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So I'm going to formally begin my talk by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means in the praise of God, who is almighty, all compassionate. Okay, so before I present my case study, I'm just going to briefly describe my work. I am trying to investigate how and why people use the Quranic text, the sacred text, in non-sacred spaces in their everyday life. That's my research area. Today, I'm just going to be presenting one case study. I have so many themes coming up from my work, so I look forward to sharing that later. But my focus for today, for this short presentation, is this artist who is a sculptor, a jewelry maker, metal worker, curator of exhibition, performer, and a curator of performances. His name is Ambreen Gulji. A little bit of his biography. He was born in Karachi, Pakistan in 1965. He is a son of well-known Pakistani artist Smiley Gulji. He did his bachelor's with a major in economics and art history. And he had his thesis on Islamic gardens. But why I'm discussing this artist? Let me contextualize it in arts in crisis, the theme for this conference. So, as you might know already, that 1947 marked the independence of Pakistan, and after the independence, there were so many crises. So I call it the circle of crises. One is the socio-political crisis, where people were migrating from one side of the border to the other side, lack of resources, lack of food, lack of shelter, illnesses, and so many crises there. The other part of the crisis is cultural or representation of identity crisis, as Pakistan was colonized and also has its heritage rooted from Indian heritage. So Pakistani people culturally were looking for something that is not Hindu, not European, something Islamic, but modern. So in that time of crisis, everyone was just challenging themselves or just asking themselves who we are, where we are, and how do we place our own social reality into this new reality, which is now a new independent country, Pakistan. Then there is a crisis in the arts. So calligraphy, as you might know, that it's a very historical art. Tradition is going back to about 1500 years ago. Artists would use the reed pen and the ink pot and would really practice their craft in years and years. After colonization, the pens and the ink and the wooden brief were replaced by brushes and canvases. So artists now dealt with the new material, but also trying to engage with their own roots that were coming from last 1400 years. So there was still crisis there that, okay, there is so much influence of Western art, but what do we do with the heritage that we have? And we value that. So that's the crisis. And what do you think? What people would do in the crisis? They would really try to maybe run away or try to find a way that they can get over with it. So what Gulji did? He said, I had two objectives. So in this crisis, I don't want to become an artist and I don't want to come back to Pakistan. So he flew to USA. He had resources and he was trying to study there, and he had only two objectives: that I may find a job in financial sector or in a bank and I'll just stay there. I would never return back to Pakistan. But his own cultural roots and interest in Islamic art and also the culture part that his father brought him to life bring him back to Pakistan. So what art is for Ambreen Gulji? I'm just going to show a few of his works, but just this is the main thing that I really want to focus, that art, as we have talked about for 2 days, that it could be many things. It could be propaganda. For Ameen, art is very personal, but as well as universal. So he would create forms which are abstract, which are meaningful to him, but he would present it to the audience and empower his audience and gives the agency to interpret in their own ways. So he's trying to touch on the metaphysical dimension of art. And when he works in a very organic way, and he do not thinks before or plans his work before. He just go in a very organic way and go into that state of mind where he just create. And it is his sense of joy, sense of love, and sense of freedom. So through abstract and non-legible letters form, Amin Gulji attempts to engage with the sacred text on a very personal level, where the sacred words or letters are internalized to an extent that their content is no longer important. The experience and the inner voice are what matters. Okay, so I'm only discussing one of his work, and he has presented these works at different locations, and I'm going to give you the very quick glimpse of that. But before that, this work is based on the Quranic verse from Surah Alaq, ayah number 5, that reads, God taught humankind what it did not know. He tries to break those verses, and this time, in this particular work that I'm discussing, he destroyed the letters in 7 sections. This work, the sculptures, was also a part of installation, so he had some performances to go with, and I'm going to show you some pictures. So he started showing this particular work in Malaysia, then brought it back to Pakistan, then went to Italy, and he had multiple performances with all these installations. This is just the list of his artwork. I'm just going to show you the pictures now. So this, as you see, this is the Amin Gulji Gallery in Karachi. You can see there is a video projection. The work is on the floor and then rising up to the sky. And I'm going to just show you a few close-ups. This is called coal carpet. And you may see some organic coals and also the letters that are being destroyed. So they are no more Quranic text, or he would just call it that I have deformed it to make it experiential art pieces for myself. So it's very personal. This work is called One, and as you see here, from the ground now the objects are starting to move upward. This is another iteration. It's called Perforated Skull and Salt Screen. Those who may read Arabic may point out some of the letters that are really evident, but he really intentionally tries to deconstruct the word, so the identity of the Quranic verses is no more evident, and he just more rely on his own experiential part of art making. So this is another work, Infinity Egg. I'm not discussing these works in detail just because of the time limitation. And you will see the floating letters in another image too. So he had the video algorithm, computer-generated program as well, where letters would come on the screen and just dissolve and move along. Here you see the video projection as well as the floating letters that are really hanging in the sky. Okay, I'm going to quickly show briefly 3 performances, the photographs of 3 performances that were accompanied with this installation. So this one is called The Beloved Son. He again played with letters. There are 2 people who are sitting in front of each other on a carpet, and they both talk to each other in a language that no one in the room understands. So it's like a personal communication between these 2 people, and whose name is basically in Urdu, one's name is Aziz and the other name is Suraj, so which is, if you translate it into English, it's called Beloved Son. So that's how he plays with the letters and the names. But the idea is that they are performing, but no one can understand, and that was really intentional. This one, he created this love letters, and he asked everyone, whoever was coming to the installation, to write a love letter to an object, to a person, to an event, to history, or to whoever they comes to mind, roll the paper, roll the paper and put it in the glass bottle, and this became the part of the installation. And he promised that he will destroy these letters without reading them. So again, the personal connection, and there is an object, but no one can touch it, no one can reach it. This is marking 1 by 7. This girl started with a really white dress, sitting just near to the installation, started to go in her personal meditative state where she would mark herself with coal. Again, this conversation that whatever is happening with her is so personal to her. Performance could be seen by people, but interpreted in very different ways. This was another presentation. It's also called Marking, but 3 by 7. And she wore her mother's wedding dress. And in South Asia, as you might know, that people put henna or mehndi on their hands. So she's trying to engage with the audience that she would mark their hands with coal. But these letters or these, again, it's very personal. Audience cannot understand what she's writing. So just towards the conclusion, art is often considered as propaganda, as form of communication and outward expression. Art is inherently social and political, but also personal and intimate. In Gulji's work, the process of creation is more inward and private, yet at the same time universal, to which audience of his work can relate to. By deliberately making his artworks unreadable and abstract, Gulji gives his audience an agency to interpret the work in whatever way they like. Through his creative endeavors, Gulji takes an opportunity to be free, to destroy the traditional form, to internalize the essence of the text so as to build personal connection with something beyond the physical material world, where the essence is experienced both by the artist and the audience. So this was his way of dealing with the crisis. Briefly connecting Amin's work to Jeffrey's Rubinov's work, and as we had been given the paper on the very first day, I found this quotation which I thought that's very relevant, so I bring it here. Art provides a means to experience the sacred beyond prescriptive narrative. So the Quranic commentaries, all the prescriptive narratives, he's just trying to ignore all of them and trying to experience the sacred word in his own personal, intimate way, where he could be free, he could express his experiences in whatever way he wants. Just the last question that I would like to close with. Since this work is more letter-based, and you have seen so many pictures and images throughout the 2 days, but this is really different. This is based on letters and alphabets. And there is a very famous expression that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So by sharing this work, this case study, I am presenting this to you. Perhaps it's time to turn the expression around and ask ourselves, does a word, letter, or an abstract form inspired by the text can generate multiple images, multiple interpretations, and imaginations and reflections in one's mind? Thank you.